Okay, action. This is 50 years old too. Yeah.
This is almost today.
I have ours yet.
It still has the original license on it.
So you say you were surprised?
Yes. Why would I not be? We have a shifty bunch in our family. Yeah, very shifty. That's Bill posterity. Hit him down the road.
I know him, Bob's boy.
New Freedom, yeah. Born and raised there. Yeah, in 29, way back when, on that famous day, 9/11.
It's 1929.
Yeah. When I was born.
Yeah.
I was quite young at the time. Yeah.
So what was it like growing up?
It was a small town. Yeah. You could leave the house in the morning, and as long as you got home by the time the 4:30 whistle blew, you were all right. Nobody knew where you were all day. No cell phones. Very few phones, actually. I can remember I was probably 15, and the guy next door to us was in the service during the war, and he called our house and wanted to know if we could get his wife to the phone. So I had to go over and get her, and she'd come on over. She didn't have a phone. There weren't too many in town, and you didn't talk to an operator. You wanted somebody else, you made the rings on there, on the side of the thing, you know. And it was, we were poor. We didn't know it, but we were. New Freedom was like a lot of small towns around the area. Shrewsbury, New Freedom, Glen Rock, Railroad, they were all self-sufficient. They all had their own grocery stores and pharmacies. You didn't have to go out of town to get anything, and it's a good thing you didn't, because there was only a few people had cars. So most people walked to work. And about 95% of the people that lived in the town worked in the town. Now New Freedom doesn't have any industry hardly at all anymore.
What was the main source of employment in New Freedom at the time?
American Insulator Corporation. They molded things for electrical stuff. Something like AMP got into when I went to work for them. And the other one was a canning factory. That was a seasonal thing, but they had they worked all year round. They had a group that worked all year, but the seasonal stuff, when in the summertime, when the produce came in, they had to can that right then, and they did. And so that was about it. And then we had 3 sewing factories in there. We had probably, I'm going to guess, probably about 15 trains came through New Freedom every day. Half of them went south and half of them went north. A lot of people came to work in the insulator in New Freedom on the train. Cousin Minnie came up from Parkton on the train every day and back down the same way. And trains were busy then. We used to get flour in the bakery. We get flour on a freight car. And feed mill there in town, of course, they got their feed in the freight cars. In fact, way back before I was born, my grandfather tells me they had a car dealer there, and they got the cars on the train, flat cars. Yeah, everything was delivered on. Mail was delivered on the train. Fellow would go from the post office. He had a push cart. He would go down there and pick up the bags of mail and bring it up to the post office. That was every time the train came through, and he would take bags of mail down to send it out. So was the newspaper dealer down there. He'd get his newspapers on the train because he happened to be right beside the tracks, and they just threw it off at him, and he'd have them. His father started that, and of course he had 2 boys, and this one went into it with him. But anyway, the 2 boys were twins, and that was handy for him because when somebody stopped one of them and said, "You threw the paper in the bushes yesterday," he'd say, "No, that wasn't me, that's my brother." Yeah, it was handy for him. So then he ran it himself then until, golly, we were still New Freedom when we were getting paper from him. He had boys hired to deliver papers. There were 4 routes in town.
Terry worked, delivered papers for him.
Yeah. New Freedom was spread out pretty much, and it was a long walking tour. You carried a bag on the side, folded the papers as you went, and tossed them off. Yeah, I did that a couple times.
I think I did that a few times too.
I think you did. Yeah. Well, go back to when I was probably about 7 or 8, I guess. They had the town's kids up at the canning factory. We'd take you out to the field in buses, and you could pick beans. They'd give you a penny a pound for picking beans. Town's kids. And I did that a couple of years before I went to work.
Well, how many pounds could you pick a day?
You were lucky if you could get 100 pounds, yeah.
So that's $1.
Yeah. You had to work your butt off because they didn't send you out to the first pick field. They send you out where the field's been picked a couple times by somebody else. Yeah. That give us something to do. What could you buy with $1? Well, you could buy 5 gallons of gas. Yeah. Yeah, my grandfather had a store in Parkton that pumped gas, and I pumped many a gallon down there, 5 for $1. Nobody gave a doggone what gas cost then. It's about like now, no matter what it goes up to, somebody needs gas, they buy it, they have to, because now we're all mobile. People got commutes to work, they got to drive. Like I said, back when I was a kid, I can only think of 5 people in the town of New Freedom that had a car. So everybody, I know Mr. Nace from Railroad, he would walk up to to work in New Freedom every day and back. That was probably a mile and a half up the tracks. He lived on railroad. And that's wrong. Mr. Waltermeyer that did the third shift on the watch box there in New Freedom. He drove up from Freeland. Yeah, it put people out of work when the train stopped running. We had off of Main Street there was a watch box. Just a little one with a seat in it and a small stove and a box beside it, which was wood and coal to burn. And there was a fellow that worked there. He would sit in there, and when a train was coming, he would walk out, hold up a stop. That's all he did. At nighttime, they did the same thing, only except they had lantern along. There were no gates or nothing like that. So that put those people out of work. Mm-hmm. Yeah. People that went along and made sure the batteries for the blinkers were working. We had two crossings in New Freedom that had blinker lights, and that was a job there. Bear Road was a big job. Hired a lot of people. That was the Pennsylvania Railroad, by the way.
So they had an office in New Freedom that these people worked out of then?
For what?
For the railroad?
No.
They would just come to wherever they needed to go?
They traveled on the train too. Either they worked there in New Freedom or they traveled on the train to get there.
Well, there was a station house. There was a station house.
Well, sure, station, that's where your freight came in.
Yeah.
You
But
know,
if you wanted to ride on the train, you had to buy a ticket.
Yes, just like everybody else. So when hurricane came through, I believe that was what, 72? They washed out a couple of the railroad bridges, and the Pennsylvania Railroad was close to bankrupt, so they just didn't do anymore. They just shut down. So that was the end of the railroad. One rail, I don't know whether it's north or south anymore, is still there. The other way, they've made a rail trail out of for people to ride bicycles and walk, even horses on it. I believe you might know about that rail trail, don't you?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
You rode your bicycle down there and drug me along with you, darn bugger. High Street. That's where I was born and raised, and
Bond Street wasn't there yet?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
Nope. No, where we are was nothing. Well, the agriculture boys at school, they would plant that, usually in something every year. Tomatoes, I can remember, was a big thing. The guys that played tennis, was nothing like a nice red ripe tomato that's warm in the sun. It's nothing like that. Bring their own salt shaker. Yeah, they ate a lot of that. Corn one year, sweet corn. Oh yeah.
They do that for the high school students?
The high school students did that, yes. It's a little bit like, I don't know, I guess Votech has some sort of deal like that. Yeah, and they had the, well, I guess the farm show now, and they put some displays and stuff in that. Like I said, we didn't get out of town much. And we used to do a lot of sledding when I was a kid. We had snow in the wintertime then, a lot more than you have now, you know. The one out, the street out in front of our house, when that'd get icy, man, we could go all the way down the street and cross the railroad tracks at the bottom. Wasn't much traffic on the road. And then Tom Summers' dad used to, he'd come over there and like on a Saturday afternoon, and we'd had a great big, like a 6-man toboggan is what it was, but with sled runners on it, and we'd take the rope, put it over the back bumper, sit there with your feet up against the bumper, you know, and he's going to drive. Well, then we'd usually have a guy on the back of that, had his feet in the front of the guy's sled behind him, and one behind him yet too, and we usually had 3 or 4 sleds going, and he'd take us all over the place. Didn't really need a lot of snow. You hit a bare spot, you got a lot of sparks, but yeah, you can't do that today either. Yeah. dangers. We didn't get hurt. Tell you a big thing when the President Roosevelt came through town on these trains, all the kids put pennies on the tracks. Man, the train run over, mash them flat. Mementos, you know. That was a big deal. Wherever he was traveling to, we never knew that. But we always got word that he was coming. So, like the terrorists today, they could certainly lay a trap if they knew that, wouldn't they? Back then, no. There was no problem. At least we didn't think so. Well, on that railroad, Abraham Lincoln came through on his way to Gettysburg for his Gettysburg Address. Back in 1860 or something like that. Yeah.
He didn't stop in New Freedom, but they stopped
Yeah,
at
he went
Hanover Junction.
Hanover Junction, and then they got the Western Maryland Railway from there. Yeah. Well, when I was probably 13 or 14, we had a bus would run out of New Freedom and go through all the small towns, pick up people to York. And I would go to York on the bus by myself. Go to York and go to a movie and get a Texas hot wiener when we came out, and then walk down the street and wait for the bus to come back home. Wouldn't do that today. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't walk down the street in York anyway, period. Back then there wasn't a fear of the city, no. Wasn't any reason to. Didn't have a problem.
And what about Baltimore? What were your experiences of going there?
Yeah, that was a little far away for us. We didn't have a bus line down there, and so we didn't go there. When we did go, I had an aunt and uncle lived down there. Every couple of weeks or so, we'd drive down to see them. Yeah, that was that was a big treat, drive all the way to Baltimore. My gosh. There wasn't a whole lot of livestock in New Freedom at that particular time. There was a couple of diehards that had chicken houses in their backyard. Nobody that was coming in new would have a chicken house, but the old folks that lived there did. And of course, when they died and moved away or whatever, then the chicken business there went off. But yeah, I can think of 6 or 7 chicken houses and 1 hog pen away. That was in the back alley. We had a slaughterhouse. Cass McCullough he was the butcher, and he had a store in town, and he did his slaughtering up in the alley right behind the bakery up there. I used to go up and watch this. And, we always had enough bars in town. We had 3 of them. You know, restaurants, I can only think of 2. Back then. One of them was a hole in the wall. Ada Jansen ran that one. And then of course we had the hotel. That was a big thing back before I was born. When the train stopped there, people could live in the hotel. There's something we did. There's, like I said, we were poor back then. Family up the street had 2 boys about our age, brother and I, and they had a little bicycle, wheels I guess about that big, and all 4 of us learned to ride on that bicycle. Yeah. It was several years later before we got bicycles at home. I remember getting them at Christmas time. Yeah, things to do in New Freedom when you were a kid, not like today, where they furnish everything for you. All kinds of stuff. You kind of had to entertain yourself, and like I said before, you go down to the ball diamond and you got a dozen kids there. You choose up sides and play baseball. And, or like I did when I was a kid, who had a junkyard there in town and had old cars, junk cars there. I learned to drive in there. I'd sit in there and like that, you know. I've spent a lot of time doing that. We had a creek run through New Freedom. It was always fun to walk down the creek. Underneath Warner Wirtz's there, they had a, I don't know whether I want to tell you this or not, they had a commode up there that dumped directly down into the creek. And there was a pile of poop down there about that high. You had to kind of skirt it to get around it. But could do that. When I was a kid, I don't know, about 12, my grandparents lived in Parkton, which is 9 miles away. And I would ride my bicycle down there on the 111. We didn't have a lot of traffic on the road, but it was okay. And we used to get on some of the hills down there. Trucks didn't go up them as fast as they did now. They get going slow. You could grab a hold of the chain on the back and hitch a ride up the hill down there. We used to do that too. My parents never found that out either, but yeah, my brother had one like that went across and out like that. I had one with this closer, but
And they'd have streamers coming down from the...
oh gosh, yes, you had to have streamers. We had a swamp below New Freedom there, and they grew these reeds. God, they must have been 6 feet tall, kind of like a piece of bamboo, but not quite that big. A bunch of boys would get down there, and we'd break them off and use them. We had spear fights, throwing them at each other. Nobody ever got hurt, but we were doing that. Uncle Si, he had been down and mowed his brother's yard, and he had the lawnmower in the trunk parked out front on the street, and he'd gotten the lawnmower out and took it down around to put it in the garage, but the trunk door was open. He didn't get that shut. And here comes two, I guess it was 2 Reek boys, come riding their bicycles down the street. And one of them, he was blind in one eye. He was a little off. But anyhow, what he was looking at, it certainly wasn't where he was going, because he ran right into the back of that doggone car, wound up in the trunk, and the door slammed. He's in it. Yeah, we got a big laugh out of that. Shrewsbury, we had one called Secret's Dam. And it wasn't very deep, probably a foot maybe. We used to take ice skates over there and go skating. I was never very good at that. I could never stand up straight in the darn things. My ankles would always turn sideways. You know. I'd wear out the skates on the side more so than on the runner.
Did you have trouble stopping?
Hmm?
Did you have trouble stopping?
No, no. Oh no, you never had trouble stopping. About like on roller skates. You know, you just fall down, it'll stop.
You just jumped down.
Yeah, this was in the winter time too. Fellow that lived down there my age, he decided what we ought to do is go over to the falls. That's a big creek that runs through there. We could probably go swimming. Yeah, okay. So we're going to go swimming. I've never been in such cold water in my life. Wasn't in very long either. Neither was he. But when I went home, I hung my shorts on the line. And my grandmother, of course, she saw it right away. What were you doing? There, we were swimming. Well, you should know better than that. Yeah, well, I do now. Yeah, I don't have to have an anvil fall on me. Used to do a lot of roller skating around New Freedom. We got a big school hill up there where the school is on top of the hill. And that was cement road then. That was great for roller skating down that hill. Yeah. I remember one time one of the wheels came off one of my skates. And of course you had to step it up. Didn't have 4 wheels on it. Only had 2 on this one and 4 on this one. And you get down to the bottom. But it was, we didn't have shoe skates or nothing like that. You probably never saw them. You have a clamp on the front of them, and you just put your shoe in there, and then you have a key, and you turn that, and these things come in and grab a hold of your sole.
Oh, no, I had a pair of them.
Oh, you had a pair of them?
Yeah.
Okay. They worked. Then they were adjustable. They had a bolt in the middle. You could make them longer or shorter. One size fit all. Yeah, we used to do a lot on the hills. They don't want nobody to do anything bad these days. They're afraid everybody's going to get hurt. And like I said, we used to drink water out of a hose, you know, laying out in the yard. Oh my God, you couldn't do that today. That's terrible. We used to have Boy Scouts in New Freedom. I think, did I tell you that? No. We collected newspapers, sold them to raise money, right? Worked, had a meeting like once a month. And you get merit badges, you had certain things you had to do. One of them I can remember is a 14-mile hike. Me and another fellow, we hiked from New Freedom over to Stewartstown. That was 7 miles. And when you get over there, then you had to build a fire and then cook your lunch. And then you come back. That's 14 miles. Then you get a merit badge for that. And not tying. Oh my. We used to go down there, the canning factory. His dad had the canning factory, and we'd go down there and I remember one time they just built a new warehouse, a large warehouse. And there was absolutely nothing in it. And we roller skate down there. The only reason I could get to roller skate there was that I knew him. And, oh yeah. When I got to driving, they had a roller skating rink in York, Playland it was called. And that was a big hangout for the kids. That was kind of organized skating, you know.
How old were you then?
Well, I was driving 16. Yeah.
Well, you were driving before that, though, right?
You what?
You were driving before 16, though, right?
Well, yeah, but not legally. A hole in your sock? Did you throw it away? That's what you do today. What did you do then? Mother sat down and darned it.
Well, you would weave.
Thread.
You would weave with thread and close that hole up.
There was a wooden piece called an egg, and you put that down into the sock, and that held the shape of the sock for your heel, and then she'd darn out on the outside of that. Oh yeah.
I probably have one of those around here somewhere.
You do?
I
An
probably
egg?
do.
Huh. You
Might
don't
have.
darn none of my socks.
Oh, no.
But then back then socks were cotton too. Today
Right,
they're nylon.
Right, they
Okay.
aren't.
I learned to drive when I was 12. And I drove Baker truck around New Freedom. Yeah. Can't do that today. Got my license, got my permit today, and tomorrow I passed my test and got my license. Because I'd been driving for 4 years, my gosh. And I guess I started when the trucks would come in the evening. When they got finished, I'd take the truck down the alley, gas it up, make sure there was enough oil in it, and that's what I did when I was younger. And we used to get, like I said, flour on the freight car, and we'd load it onto one of Schuhart's trucks and bring it over into the alley. And then we had a pulley upstairs and a big rope. We put the rope around 2 bags of flour, and the other end was hooked to the front bumper of the car. You back up and pull it up, and they pull it in, and you pull up. Now, in 200 bags, you only had to make 100 trips like that. Like I said, that's
Ingenuity, huh?
yeah. Oh, I was great, man. Driving the car, good heavens. Got to help the guy that ran the Baker truck around New Freedom. I got to help him on Saturdays because it was, you know, the big day. And so he'd be somewhere, and then he'd say, move the truck up to the next one. So that's when I was doing it. Well, I went to work when I was 12. Nowadays you have to get a Social Security card when you're born. Back then you didn't until you went to work. And I went to work in the bakery. Dad had the bakery, you know. I guess it was gone before you were born though, but we closed that in 1959. I worked in there, icing buns,
Mm-hmm.
packing them. They had Summit Grove, which was a Christian camp up the other side of town, which is still there, by the way, and they had the train stop up there, a special for the people getting on and off of there to go to the camp. Yeah, it was big. I know at the bakery we used to take orders for them. They would tell us what they wanted for breakfast, which would probably be biscuits. So we make up 300 biscuits and take them up there right out of the oven. And then they might want a bunch of sandwich rolls for lunch. They'd take them up there right after that. And then we make 60, 70 cherry pies for supper. Yeah, so we traveled. We had a good business up there for that. And we made rolls for all the carnivals around New Freedom and Maryland Line and Hereford, which was a big deal. Well, I can remember one thing that would come from the bakery was we eat fast. We have to do that again because we'd have 300 loaves of bread in the oven and then go home and have lunch. Had to get back because when it was done, you had to come out, you know. So we, all of us, Dad and brother and I, all learned to eat fast. No, we didn't have a kindergarten at that particular time. That's something that came later. Yeah, but you could start when you were 6. And we had 12 years. And I guess the school was all right, I guess. I got out of it anyhow.
Well, there was no cafeteria. You went home for your lunch.
Oh yeah, you had to walk. It was about a mile. Walk to school in the morning, walk home for lunch, back after lunch, and then walk home in the evening. We had the normal stuff in school. We did have plays. Every year they had plays. My gosh, I was a star in one of them. I remember. Yeah, I can't even remember the name of it anymore.
Was it a musical?
Oh, we didn't do musicals. No, God, no. It was a farce, I'll put it that way. Farce will work good. Yeah. I had a bad time because my 3rd grade teacher went to school with my mother, so I couldn't get away with nothing. Yeah.
So how many kids were in your class?
How many? I think 27. And now that I'm 77 years old, there's only 5 of them dead. We got a very low mortality rate in school. Yeah. So I graduated in 47. So that 50th would have been 97. God, that's 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. An awful lot of guys in service. Oh yeah, during the war. A lot of them didn't make it back too. Yeah, I could think of probably 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then of course every small town had the same thing. You know, back then they had a little more pride than they have today. I'm talking about the people, not the people in the service, the people. You had a boy in the service, you had a sign you could put in the window. It was a little flag with a star on it. Said you had a son in the service, or 2 or 3, however many, and then of course you saw some gold stars. Those are the ones that didn't come back. Yeah. My uncle Harold, he was in the Battle of the Bulge in Belgium. And they had that. They were trapped in the snow, run out of bullets, run out of food, and it was too foggy. They couldn't get any airdrops in for them, and the Germans were about to wipe them out. That's when the Germans came in with a white flag and wanted to talk to the commander. McAuliffe was his name, and asked him to surrender. He said, "You only got one word, nuts." They couldn't quite understand what nuts meant, but they got the idea. But they stayed, and the weather cleared, and they could drop some supplies. They were in business again, but it was awful cold.
Your uncle was in that battle?
Yep, Uncle Harold. Horses, they called him. I don't know why.
And he was in the Army then?
Uh-huh. Oh, 82nd Airborne. My brother was in. He was in the Navy. He was a radioman. I didn't quite make it. I was only 16 and the war's over. You can say whether that's good or bad. I don't know. Depends.
Was there a big celebration in New Freedom?
Oh, heavens, yes. Oh, my God. Yeah, we had all the factory whistles were blowing. Oh, it was a big deal. Yeah. All the manufacturing that we had was made for the war projects. The car manufacturers made Jeeps and that kind of stuff. They didn't make automobiles. They just didn't. Everything was rationed. You got if you had a car, which my dad did, he used in his business. You get a ration sticker. You get 5 gallons of gas with one of these things. It usually amounted to about 5 a week. That's all. There wasn't any more. You needed new tires. You had to fix the old one some way or other. They didn't make new tires. They made them, but they made them for the Army. And so it wasn't until war was over in 45, it wasn't until right after the war when they started making automobiles that we could buy. We had a movie hall.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
And what kinds of movies would they be? First run movies that would be there? Or why would you go to York instead of going
Well, the ones in New Freedom were first run, but they were first run somewhere else 2 years before that, you know. Took a while to get them to us. Oh, yeah. But we had, I went to every movie. We had two a week, one on Monday and Tuesday and one on Friday and Saturday. And we had a big billboard out in front of the bakery where they would put in this great big, flyer or whatever of what was coming. So we got a pass for keeping that there. So I would use it one day and brother would use it the other one, and then the same way. So I saw all the movies. Yeah.
What about Gone with the Wind? Did that
Oh,
come
yes,
different?
God, we saw Gone with the Wind. Oh, yeah. But that was back, heck, we got out of school to see that, by the way. That was one afternoon. I can't remember how old I was, but I couldn't have been too old. I'm going to say 8 or 9, maybe 10. I don't know.
They had newsreels on the beginning of the movie and cartoons. And
Yeah.
did they have previews of other movies that would be coming to the theater?
It was coming,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah, the previews, and then a bunch of selected shorts, they called them, which was cartoons and funny stuff. 2 television sets in Parkton. My grandfather had one, and Dr. France had the other one. The screen size was postcard, very small. It was an RCA, and I'm talking 1946. It cost $1,000 at that time. That was a terrific amount of money because you could get a new car for less than that. If you could find one, by the way, after the war. There were no cars or anything being made during the war. So the $1,000 was all right. Probably 10 years later, RCA gave everybody a rebate of $500 for that because they figured it charged them too much. Yeah, down at my grandfather's, when Milton Berle was on Tuesday night, there'd be at least a dozen people in that room now watching something like that. You know, yeah. And they only broadcast so many hours a day, show-wise now. But they had to broadcast by law so many hours a day, and they didn't have anything to fill that time. So they broadcast test pattern, it was called. Didn't do nothing. It just sat there. and people watched it. I'm serious. They watched it. Oh yeah, Milton Berle was a big deal. Cavalcade of Stars, Colgate Comedy Hour. I like that. They had a different comedian every week. It was an hour show. Bob Hope, Red Skelton, people like that. And, I always liked comedy anyhow. But I'm a bit of a comic myself, you know. They would come on, and your host, who was one of the comedians, and they'd have he'd have his shtick, and then we might have guests come in and do his act, and then somebody else did their act, and somebody else. That was the variety shows. I like them. You don't see them anymore. It was interesting. People did still go to see movies too, because not everybody had the televisions then. You know, like I say, they were too expensive for most people. Yeah. Freedom had baseball and football. I played football.
Oh, really? I didn't know you played football.
You didn't know that?
No.
Oh, yeah.
What position did you play?
Right guard. Back then we had what they called a running guard. That's what I was. And I pulled out and run interference for the ball runner.
Okay.
That's what the right guard did back then.
A blocker.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I was hefty, boy. I mean, probably I must have gone 130 pounds.
That's pretty hefty.
Yeah.
Compared to how I was in high school, that is hefty.
Well, you got to, yeah, that's true. You got to know, you know, the rest of the kids on the team were about that size too.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. Back then we weren't in any league. We had what I guess we call pickup games. We played Bill Penn in York up at Smalls Athletic Field, and we played West York. Glen Rock, the other little town which is close to us, didn't have football. They had basketball. Yeah, Doc Hare was the coach. Yeah, I lettered 4 years. We didn't have any JVs. In fact, we only had 12 boys out for football. You know, you had to almost get on the team, you know. If you could stand up, you could be on the team. It was 60-minute people, you know. They didn't have any second crew come in for defense, nothing like that. No, nothing fancy. And the baseball team didn't do too badly. And some of our guys moved up to the big leagues. They didn't stay up there too long, but they at least had tries out for it. I played a lot of tennis too. I guess you knew that, yeah.
How did you get started on that?
My dad played, yeah. He had a tennis court in his yard he built. And yeah, he's quite a player. When my brother was born, they had a wet nurse doing this. And she was quite a, I wouldn't say mean lady, but what she said went. And she told my dad, "Get out from under my feet, get out of here, I don't need you at all." So he went out in the backyard and he got his shovel and his pick and a wheelbarrow and he started digging a tennis court. And he built the tennis court in their backyard just to stay out of their things. Well, he was, favorite was tennis, and he played a lot of times back then. The interest in tennis was really high. We had people there all the time playing tennis. I knew over at Dad's, we had lights over there, and we played when it was dark. The lights weren't real good, but we could see. I think we played a lot by sound shot. You know, you hear where it bounced and try to hit it. But no, it was fun. Brother sold soda. Had a soda truck stop there a couple times a week because we sold a lot of it. There really wasn't much else to do in New Freedom, you know, in your spare time, so you played tennis. Well, baseball, but at our house was tennis. And then at that particular time, I guess tennis was starting on the down slope. You know, it travels like that. You know. So at one time, I was the best tennis player in New Freedom. Of course, I was the only tennis player in New Freedom at that time too. You know. I remember every year too at 4th of July he'd bring a bread box home full of fireworks, and brother and I would be out on the tennis court all day long shooting off fireworks. That you don't do anymore either. We had these Roman candles. I don't know whether you know what they are. They shoot balls of fire out. Well, he'd stand on one side of the court and I'd stand on the other, and we'd fire at each other. You could see it coming. It didn't come that fast, but you could see it coming, easily avoid it. But yeah, we did that. Nobody ever got hurt, even got burned. At the 4th of July, we'd go down to Parkton. My dad, like I said, my grandparents had a store down there, and they sold fireworks. So I had all the fireworks I needed there too. Back then they had a torpedo. I don't know whether you ever heard of them. I'm sure you didn't. But it was probably as big as a large acorn. And if you threw it down, it would explode. So I had fun throwing them at the side of trucks as they came by the road there. Explode. It was loud. Yeah. All you had to do was throw it. Go off like a hand grenade now. Then we had what they called penny crackers. They were just small. You could hold one in your fingers and light it and let it go off, and your fingers wouldn't hurt you at all. It was only about that long and about half the diameter of a soda straw. Very small. Penny crackers. I remember one time there was turkey buzzard flying around, and brother got his .22 rifle, and he fired. Doggone if he didn't hit that darn thing. And it was a big, big thing. I know it landed on the neighbor's roof up there, made an awful noise. I believe that was illegal to do that. It didn't seem to matter.
You go to the firing range with it?
Range?
Yeah.
No, we don't have any firing ranges around. They happen to be at that time anywhere you happen to be. So, well, we'll go over to Dad's. From there, there wasn't anything over on Bond Street at all. That was all farmer's field. And, you know, shooting 22s at cans or whatever you're doing out there. That was the shooting range right there in the backyard, you know. Yeah, I remember one time over at Charlie's, I saw it looked like an eagle or some big bird like that sitting on the wire. This wire belonged to the REA, where your dad used to work, and I was going to get that. I took my high-powered rifle, and I did not hit the bird, but I cut that wire slick as you can be. Kind of cut off all the current around the area. You know, it would current would come in. What they did, they went to one farm, and from there they'd go to the next one, and then to the next one after that was all in a line. So wherever you cut it, from there down, they didn't have any current. So the REA, the Adams Electric boys came over. Damn, it must have been an airplane hit that thing. I don't know.
An airplane.
That takes a lot. Well, that cable was probably as big as my finger. Boy, I couldn't understand that. Well, they were only there a little while, and they had it all fixed, and everybody had current again. So, yeah, that's one of those accidents. I wasn't shooting for the wire, believe me. Yeah, like I said, I didn't hit him. Probably give him a hot foot or something, I don't know. It was close to him, I know. Because I wasn't too bad a shot back then.
What were you going to do if you did shoot the bird? Would you have eaten it, or?
No.
It was just for fun?
It's just kind of like they do deer hunting now, you know. They go out and they see a 12-point buck and say, boy, isn't that a beautiful animal? Let's kill it. Makes sense? No, it don't. No, it don't. Like I say, these people people want to be so doggone careful. Don't do this, don't do that. Knives. I think when I went to school, every kid in school had a pocket knife. Every one. And carried them all the time. I'm talking grade school now. And can't have a knife in school today. Oh my gosh, you know. Well, I remember one Christmas, my grandfather there in New Freedom bought me a hunting knife. About that long blade and a handle. Sheath. You don't see them going out to kids today. Oh, heavens no. I think we're trying to be too careful. Yeah. You got to teach a kid, like you're going to give him a rifle, you got to teach him how to use it safely. You know, you just don't, here's a rifle for you. No, you got to teach him how to use it, where it's safe to fire it, and how.
I fell into a burning ring of fire. I went down, down, down.
You're mine, and we belong together. Yeah.
She was working at the Busy Bee restaurant as a, well, I guess you were a waitress and a counterman too. Yeah, and I'd stop in there, and we got to chatting. So one time, I asked her, going to have a birthday. I want to celebrate my birthday. We want to go along. Yeah, she'd go along. So that was the first date. 9/11, by gosh.
9/11, what year?
55. Yeah, 55. And we didn't get married till 57. Yeah.
So when were you engaged?
Oh gosh.
56.
Christmas 56, yeah. Yeah, she begged me, and I kept saying no, but she finally wore me down.
So you had my mom and Terry, and then
Previous to that, yeah. Yeah. Yes, and then we got married, and then we lived over at Mother and Dad's till got our house finished, and then we moved over there.
Together, yes, we belong together for eternity. You're mine, your lips belong to me. Yes, they belong to only me for eternity. You're mine, my baby.
I went home for dinner. I was riding the Baker truck all week. Thursdays we didn't go out with the truck, so I was home working at the shop. So I went home for lunch. Jackie and Terry were in the backyard playing, and I went in and sat down to read the paper, and dinner got ready. Jackie was in the house, and Terry wasn't. I'll go out and get Terry, but I didn't see him anywhere. My neighbor had a big fish pond down there, and I, as a kid, we used to dive into the doggone thing. So the first place I best look is in that fish pond, which sure enough, he's in it. He's got his snowsuit on, and he's floating about 4 inches under the water. The snowsuit full of air, it's keeping him up. So I got him out of there and gave him artificial respiration. Got him breathing again. He'd breathe, he'd take a breath and then hold it. And I picked him up and carried him to the house, and they called the doctor, and the doctor came right over. And this was, like I said, probably February. It was cold. And Doctor said you need to get warm towels, blankets, whatever, but they have to be warm. Warm them up first and put them on him because he's beyond shivering. His metabolism was that low that he couldn't shiver and make his own heat. So we wrapped him up in these warm blankets, and I don't know, half hour or so he started to shiver. And doctor says, well, now he's making heat for himself now, so he'll be all right. He gave him a shot of antibiotics for anything he might have got in the fish pond, and that was it. Next morning he got up, and I think he had 3 eggs for breakfast. He was a hungry boy. He missed supper that day. And no ill effects. He was fine. So the next day, I guess I went down to the place where the fish pond was. I thought I'd best tell the lady down there what happened before she hears it someplace else. And I did. And she's very understanding. Oh my, she said, we've been talking about getting rid of that fish pond. We'll get rid of it now. And that day yet, the canning factory crew was up there and broke the sides in and filled it up with dirt and planted grass. That was that quick. But her boys and I grew up together, and we dive into that thing many, many times. It was about 4 feet deep. Jackie and Terry in the back seat. We come up through Maryland line, and Jackie's grandma lived in there, so she leaned against the door. It wasn't locked. Jumped the door, and she fell out on the highway. And I pulled over and picked her up. She had a great big lump on the back of her head, mushy. So I just put her in the car and rushed her right up to the hospital. And they checked her out. She was said all right. That was on a Sunday. Then Thursday, following Thursday, that's when Terry went into the pond. I guess that's the only 2 big things that happened to him. That's enough. We didn't have any money. And
what year was this?
1956.
That's when we started.
Yeah, we weren't married at the time. We decided. I asked my father-in-law to be, how much of a house you think I can build myself? And he said, I don't see why you can't build it all. He didn't hesitate. He had a lot of faith. Okay, so we got together and we decided we can try it. So I had a great sum of $250. That was it. Mother had $250. It gave us a grand total of $500. And I borrowed $1,000 from Dad, and we bought the lot. They cost more than that now, but back then it was $1,500. So then, now the high finance starts. We mortgaged my dad's house. Got $6,000, and we started. Put the foundation in, had a bulldozer in there, dug the foundation. Mother and I did the footer. I laid blocks, never laid blocks before.
What's the footer? Is that the one that goes around the outside?
Well, it's your base that your wall sits on, your basement wall sits on. Mm-hmm. It's like so, not that thick, heavy.
With cinder blocks?
No, cement.
It's concrete.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So her dad came down. He set up a corner on the blocks, two corners there, and I guess they were five courses high a block. So I was finished up in between there, and now I had that end at 5 courses a block, and I called him, come down, set up another corner for me. He came down and he looked at my work. He says, hell, set up your own damn corners. So I did. Set up my own corners. To finish the foundation, while I was laying blocks, she's on the other side of the block, on the outside of the block, between the dirt and that, and she's pitching the wall. Oh, she's a mess over there. Weren't you? Yeah.
Now you were working on weekends and evenings.
40 hours a week in addition to my regular job. At least 40 hours a week, I say. At least. Because Saturday, Sunday, and every night. Well, there was a fellow over that I passed on the bread route. She had a design of what she wanted in the house, the layout. And I passed this place, and I liked the looks of it. So I got her, and we went over there and stopped. And the man had built that one, and he had the plans there. So I bought the plans from him. So now she needs to put her layout inside this house, which worked out just fine because it was just about the same doggone thing. So then her grandfather, who was a carpenter, that's saying a little bit. He was a cabinet maker. He was a good carpenter. But anyhow, he knew what was going on, so he gave me a day a week on that. He helped one day every week. And we put in the floor, and we started up, and we got it under roof. Now I'm out of money. Can't live in it yet, but it's out of money. So what we did then, we went to the banker. Now that it's under roof, I'd like to borrow some money on my house so I can finish it. So that's what we did. So now we got two mortgages, one on that one and one on Dad. So we kept going, we got her all finished, and we went back and we refinanced. We paid off Dad's house. Now it's all on us. So that's how we did it. I laid 30,000 bricks, which I never did before either. But yeah, I never did a lot of that stuff before, but I have now. So it was a good experience, hard work.
And how did you learn to do the masonry? And did you just by doing it?
Just did it. I mean, on the bricks, when we started, they were building houses up the end of the street. And I stopped there on the bread truck one day. They were laying bricks, and I watched a bit, and the fellow said to me, he said, are you interested in bricklaying? Well, a little bit, yeah. Well, he said, just watch, boy, you'll learn. So when I was ready to lay bricks, they were putting bricks on the house just above where we were. So I'm laying bricks, and he came over and said, boy, you weren't kidding when you said you want to lay bricks. No, I wasn't. Watch, I put, like I say, put the 30,000 bricks. And it was a pretty nice house, wasn't it, Mom? In fact, it's still there. Yeah, it's still there.
Did a stone fireplace in the basement.
Yeah. Fireplace in the basement.
Tell them where you got the stone.
Yeah, I was going to say, on the bread route, way down into Maryland there, they were building a road, and they ran into a lot of stone. So they were blasting them out. And they were pretty stones. So I thought, doggone it, I believe I'd like to put stones on the fireplace in the basement. So every time I'd go by there, I'd load half a dozen stones in the back of the truck. And then when I got home, I'd stop up there and I'd throw them down in the foundation. So that's where the stones came from. We built the stones down there. We were right at the end of the field, and Kenny Stifler was a fireman. And he stopped there one day, and I was putting bricks in the, just started in the breezeway. And then he says, I believe I'd like to have a fireplace in the breezeway. I said, damn, that's a good idea, Kenny. So we had just so much space. 36 inches is a flue, or a damper, but we only had 30 inches. And we found we could get a 30-inch damper, so we did. Now we had a fireplace on the breezeway. One in the basement, one in the living room, and one on the breezeway. Yeah.
Did you use that fireplace in the breezeway?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Oh, we did that. Used that for a lot of stuff. We did even roast corn in there. You might have got some of it.
Well, how long did it take to build the house?
2.5 years.
And you were working on it that intensely for the whole 2.5-year period?
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. Like I said, at least 40 hours, and most of the time was 60. Yeah, and then they're going to build a post office in New Freedom. And we got a rap on the door. I went to the door, and the fellow said, My name is Carl Riddleberger. Imagine I can still remember that. I don't know. And he said, we're building the post office downtown. And he said, wonder if you'd be interested in kind of maybe helping. I said, well, help what? Well, he said, kind of oversee things. What the hell do I know about that? Well, he said, you built this, didn't you? Travel, news travel, right? Yeah. Well, you'll do then. So then I went down, we built post office in town. And, that was something. I don't remember what happened after that. Oh, I knew what I did. I got another job. Yeah, I went to, how about that? I was working at AMP at that particular time on the third shift, 11 at night until 7 in the morning. And then I would come home at 8 o'clock. I would go down to work at the blacksmith shop till 5. So I worked 7 nights a week up at AMP and 5 days a week on the blacksmith shop. That was long weeks. I did that for a long time, didn't I, Mom? But like I said, we were poor. We had a big mortgage. Mom worked a job and home too.
And that mortgage, Dan, was $12,000 back then. And that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where did you work then?
Ah,
I worked at the Hungerford Packing Company in the office as bookkeeper, which is Hungerford now is part of Shrewsbury.
and she worked in York too. At where?
McCrory's. That was only like 6 months.
And then she worked at New Freedom Canning Factory too. Till they closed, right?
No.
Huh?
Mm-mm.
No?
I quit there.
Well, then where'd you go? Started your business?
J&N.
Oh, okay. Then her and Nancy started their own business, crafts, at the, over there at Shrewsbury in the factory, right? Yeah, I recall that. We're busy old farts.
Yeah.
And,
Well, you managed to have kids all
huh?
during the same time too. You had managed to have kids and raise kids at the same time.
Yeah, imagine that. And then Juan Holt wanted to finish out the upstairs at his house. It was unfinished. And I did that. I put the 2 rooms upstairs and tile on the floor and paneling on the wall and drop ceiling up top. So I did that too in my spare time.
Had you thought of working as a contractor?
No, I didn't do anything like that afterwards. You know, it was a small job. One Holt. Yeah, and I went and worked for him. We did truck bodies we were making, welding and handling lumber, sawing, anything needed to be done.
When did you stop working at the bakery?
1959, we closed the bakery, and I went to work in the canning factory for 2 months. And of course, I had my name in other places, and AMP called me in 2 months, and I quit and went to AMP. Stayed there 31 years, retired from there. So I started as a material handler. That's about as low as you can get. Anything, because it paid more than the canning factory. I was making $1.15 at the canning factory an hour. So then I went up to AMP, and I got $1.45. Well, now that was a big jump. Plus 10% for night shift, was pushed up to $1.60. Man, I was rich. So I applied for a job of apprentice toolmaker. And that came up, you know, and they gave tests at that particular time, and they would take, I don't say they'd take the best one, but they'd take one of them anyhow, which I happened to be fortunate enough to be one of them. So I learned my trade over there in the shop. And then you got to be journeyman B. And then after I was there a while, they decided to promote me to toolmaker A. And shortly after that, I was appointed lead man in the shop. And shortly after that, I was appointed supervisor in the shop. And what the heck did I do next? Help, Mom. Oh, okay. Then I got to be production supervisor in the compression department. I had probably 40 people working under me back then. And then the boss in the engineering department, he wanted me to come in there. Well, I'm not an engineer. I don't have any education like that. Yeah, you do. So I became an engineer. Yesterday I couldn't even spell it, engineer, and today I are one, you know, that kind of stuff. So yeah, I was engineering. And what I had was practical experience, which the engineers coming there right out of college, they had all the book learning in the world, but they didn't have any practical experience. So I guess you could say I might have been trained in some of them. And then I retired from that particular job. December 31st of '89. Yeah, what it was, they decided they were going to cut down on it. They're going to have a buyout. And they said, "Old man, you've been in the way long enough. Here's some money, get out." So I did. And then when I decided to take the buyout, now I'm retiring, right? In the next 2 weeks, I got 3 different offers for jobs. All of them with AMP. One of them in California.
I remember you saying about that.
Huh?
Why didn't you want to take those jobs?
I was
You wanna
retired.
work? Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I told the man. Hey, I'm retired. If I wanted to work, I'd stay right here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What were they doing?
Yeah.
They were molding plastic. Yeah. AMP made, at that time, everything for the electrical industry, wire caps, and we got into, eventually, into the space program, making things for that. In fact, I had one that was mine when I was in the shop. It was Autonetics. I don't know what the heck that name meant, but I knew what we were making. It had little 160 blades that were in there. They would stick the gold contacts in and mold it around these gold contacts. And every time that was ejected from the mold, these little blades, which were 7 thousandths thick, by the way, would have to come up and clean the slot out so that this person could stick the next load in. Nobody else wanted anything to do with that one. That was a little tedious. I liked it. And so I was friends with the guy that ran it in the back. And of course, when he had problems with it, he'd bring it up to me. And of course, he didn't have any work to do back there, so he'd sit there and watch. So I said, "Why don't you take your test, for Lord's sakes?" "Nah, I don't want to do that." "Oh, Wayne, you oughta." "No, I don't want to do that." So I was on vacation one time, and they had a problem with this. "Well, this is going to be shut down. Trout's not going to be back for a week." Wayne says, "I believe I can do it." So he did.